Have you ever wondered why some people seem to move through life finding love easily, while others wander through long deserts of solitude, feeling that their heart still hasn't found the right place to rest? This waiting, which so often feels like punishment, is in fact a ritual of preparation. The universe, with its apparent cruelty, does not punish, it refines. Carl Jung believed that every soul carries within it a kind of inner destiny, a journey that cannot be rushed or shortened. For some people, especially those who refuse to settle for anything less than authenticity, life imposes a more rigorous process before they can experience true love. These are the so-called rare souls, those who cannot be satisfied with shallow bonds, who cannot pretend contentment or shrink their depth to fit into social molds. Loneliness, doubt, encounters that seem promising but fade like mirages, all of these are part of a path of refinement. The universe seems to test us, as if silently asking, will you be ready to recognize what is true when it finally appears before you? Or are you still deceived by the illusions of desire and projections of your own shadow? These trials are not arbitrary. They exist so we can learn to distinguish between love that merely fills space and love that expands consciousness, between neediness that seeks to be filled and wholeness that seeks to be shared. Much like in Stoic philosophy, every difficulty is not an obstacle, but a discipline of the soul, the building of an inner fortress capable of sustaining deep union. In this video, we will explore the 5 great tests the universe places before rare souls, before granting them the encounter that transcends the ordinary experience of love. The journey is not easy, but each stage carries a greater purpose, preparing you to recognize, receive, and sustain a connection that does not diminish you, but expands who you are. Before we begin, I invite you to subscribe to the channel, leave your comment, and share this video with someone who may be walking this same path. Together, we can strengthen this community of seekers of truth, soul, and conscious love. The first test, loneliness imposed as the soul's laboratory. Few human experiences weigh as heavily as loneliness that is not chosen, but imposed. I am not speaking of voluntary solitude, the conscious decision to withdraw from the noise of the world in order to reflect and reconnect with oneself. I mean the emptiness that seems to invade the soul, when no relationship resonates with your essence, when every encounter feels hollow, when you are surrounded by people and still feel the absence of true communion. This loneliness is the first test of the universe. It is not punishment, but necessary separation. Jung described this process as a withdrawal from the collective unconscious, a breaking away from inherited expectations of family, culture, and social pressures. It is as if life pulls us out of all the scenarios where we could simply go with the flow and places us face to face with the hardest task of all, discovering what truly belongs to us. During this period, the feeling of not belonging can become intense. Watching friends and peers build families, accumulate love stories, or celebrate seemingly stable relationships, we are tempted to believe something is wrong with us. Yet this very disconnection is proof that we carry a different calling. Our soul can no longer accept the shallow. Neuroscience shows us that the human brain tends to seek familiar patterns, even painful ones, because they provide emotional comfort zones. That is why many settle for relationships that repeat old dynamics, even if they lack fulfillment. Rare souls, however, instinctively resist this repetition. Loneliness, in this case, acts as a filter, keeping the wrong connections from occupying the space meant for the authentic encounter. This first test teaches us the difference between neediness and capacity for connection. Loneliness must transform into solitude, the fertile space where consciousness expands and the bond with oneself deepens. In that forced silence, we learn to tell apart genuine desire from conditioned expectation, the need for company from the longing for true reciprocity. The universe watches. Will you lower your standards to escape temporary pain, or remain faithful to your own depth, even if it costs you more time waiting? This is the first trial. If endured with courage, it turns loneliness into the soul's laboratory, where self-love and clarity of purpose begin to bloom. The second test, the illusion of the projected soulmate. After enduring imposed solitude, the universe presents a more enigmatic challenge, the arrival of someone who seems to carry all the answers your soul has long awaited. This encounter rarely comes quietly. On the contrary, it often brings an almost supernatural sense of familiarity, as if you had finally found your other half. This figure, both enchanting and mysterious, activates what Jung called anima and animus, the archetypes of the inner feminine and masculine that live within us all. When we project these images onto another person, the attraction feels irresistible. It is not just chemistry, it feels like standing before a mirror reflecting hidden aspects of our own soul. But here lies the trap. What we see in the other is often not the person themselves, but a projection of our own needs. We fall in love not with them, but with the part of us they awaken. This type of bond can feel overwhelming, but it carries the seeds of dissolution, because what unites us is not reality, but idealization. At this stage, many confuse intensity with destiny. The mind creates stories. If I feel this much, it must be true love. But the neuroscience of attachment shows that our brains can release surges of dopamine and oxytocin simply from the promise of deep connection. In other words, it feels like love because our reward circuits are in overdrive. But ecstasy is not the same as authenticity. This second test demands discernment. The universe asks, will you be able to distinguish the temporary glow of projection from the lasting warmth of truth? Can you see when you are being loved only in fragments, for the convenient parts of you, and not in your wholeness? The lesson here is painful but necessary. Being loved in pieces is not the same as being loved in full. The kind of love that confuses projection with intimacy always erodes the self, until one day you realize you've lost yourself trying to fit into someone else's expectations. The universe once again watches. Will you accept partial love out of fear of never finding more, or will you let it go, trusting that something more authentic is waiting? This is the heart of the second test, learning not to settle for reflections, but to wait for real presence. The third test, self-sabotage disguised as prudence. If the second test confronts us with the illusion of projection, the third reveals something subtler and even more challenging, our own resistance to true love. Paradoxically, when someone genuinely right finally appears, it is often we ourselves who raise the walls. Jung believed the psyche has defense mechanisms that act as guardians of the shadow. When a real possibility of love arises, these guardians awaken, whispering doubts. Is this person really trustworthy? Isn't this moving too fast? What if this is just another disappointment in disguise? This inner voice wears the mask of prudence, but is often pure fear. This is where self-sabotage takes hold. The right person arrives, bringing presence, consistency, and care. And still, we find flaws. We compare them to impossible standards, suspect them without reason, demand more than necessary. We create silent tests to measure their devotion, delaying responses, provoking minor conflicts, or projecting expectations of abandonment just to confirm old stories. Neuroscience explains part of this. Our brains protect us from potential pain by replicating old defense strategies. If we grew accustomed to abandonment, any genuine closeness may feel like a threat, because it challenges the familiar pattern. The paradoxical comfort of past suffering feels in some way safer than the vulnerability love requires. The paradox is clear. We long for authentic connection, yet when it appears, we're tempted to destroy it to avoid the risk of new hurt. The ego prefers the certainty of loneliness to the uncertainty of surrender. And this is where the universe focuses its lens. Can you tell the difference between wisdom and fear? This test is cruel because it is not about the other, but about facing ourselves. We must discern when caution is real and when it is just a mask for avoidance. Many rare hearts push away those who could stay simply because their minds convince them love isn't safe. The shadow in this test plays the role of saboteur. It reminds us of past failures, fuels fear, and feeds fantasies of rejection. But if faced, it can become an ally, showing us that vulnerability is not weakness, but the condition for true connection to flourish. The universe does not intervene here. It silently watches whether you can receive what you asked for without destroying it before it blooms. This is a test of receptivity. Are you truly ready to accept love, or are you still more attached to the nobility of suffering? Passing this test means daring to believe, without guarantees. It means lowering your guard and allowing yourself to be loved fully, even with the risk of pain. The truth is, it was never the universe that denied you love. It was you who had to learn not to sabotage its arrival. The fourth test, vibrational recalibration. After facing loneliness, projection, and self-sabotage, we arrive at one of the most demanding stages, vibrational recalibration. Here, the universe no longer tests just your patience or courage, but your willingness to let go of outdated versions of yourself that no longer serve true love. Jung called this process individuation, the slow, often painful journey of becoming who you really are instead of living by inherited expectations. It is a kind of symbolic death, leaving behind roles, stories, and identities that, however comfortable, imprison your essence. In practice, this means realizing that certain friendships, environments, or habits that once felt indispensable now feel limiting. Conversations that once brought joy now feel empty. Places once comforting now confine. Routines that once gave meaning now weigh you down. What is happening? Your energy is shifting. Your vibration no longer resonates with what belongs to an outdated version of you. Quantum physics offers a useful metaphor. Each human being emits frequencies. When you force yourself to remain in misaligned environments, it is like tuning into the wrong radio station. Static dominates, and the music cannot play. Vibrational recalibration is the fine-tuning that allows you to align with the reality that matches your authenticity. But here lies an essential detail. This process requires letting go of victimhood narratives, so common among rare souls. Many shape their identity around, "No one understands me," "My path is different," or "I suffer because I feel too much." While partly true, these stories can become invisible chains. The universe asks you to release even the pride of being misunderstood. This does not mean denying your pain, but freeing yourself from it as the definition of who you are. When you realize you are not only the result of your wounds, but also the strength born from them, a powerful shift happens. You stop vibrating in the frequency of lament and begin radiating the frequency of creation. This fourth test is demanding because it involves losing reference points. It is common to feel displaced, as if leaving one home without yet finding another. But this emptiness is necessary. It is the fertile ground for the next version of yourself. The universe observes. Will you release what is comfortable but limiting in order to receive what is true but expansive? That is the dilemma. Recalibration is dying to what was, so you can be born into what is becoming. And only those who embrace this symbolic death are ready to sustain a love that doesn't shrink you, but enlarges you. The fifth test, the paradox of surrender. Few trials are as disorienting as this one. After everything you've endured, loneliness, illusions, self-sabotage, and recalibration, the universe asks you to let go of the very thing you've longed for most: love. The demand seems absurd. How could life, after so many deserts, so many tears, and so much transformation, ask you to release your deepest desire? But here lies the paradox. Only when we stop desperately seeking love does true love finally appear. The Stoics called this state amor fati, to love fate exactly as it is, without resistance, without expecting reality to bow to our wishes. Jung, in his own way, saw individuation as the same demand: to become so whole in yourself that union with another is no longer a need, but a choice. Surrender here does not mean resignation. It is not accepting eternal emptiness or settling for lack. It is something else, reaching such deep inner wholeness that love is no longer pursued as medicine, but lived as celebration. You stop scanning every person as a potential partner, stop measuring each encounter through the lens of lack, and start living as someone already whole. In the language of quantum physics, it is like inverting your magnetic field. Instead of emitting the frequency of lack, which attracts only more absence, you begin to radiate the frequency of fullness. And in that fullness, you naturally attract the similar, another being equally whole, able to share without demanding completion. This is one of the hardest tests because it requires radical trust. It means believing that in letting go, you don't lose, you make room. The universe asks, can you stop searching for love so it can finally find you? Those who fail remain stuck in endless cycles of searching, gathering connections that look promising but never last. Those who surrender discover a quiet power, the magnetism of authenticity. This final surrender is the ultimate preparation. It is the moment when the soul at last does not need, and precisely because it no longer needs, it can receive. For only those who know themselves as whole can sustain a bond where two do not become halves of a single whole, but two wholes meeting to multiply their strength. Recognition when two whole souls meet. After crossing the 5 tests, something changes quietly within you. The search that was once anxious gives way to calm confidence. Your heart no longer races at every possibility, nor builds wild expectations. It is in this state of wholeness that the true encounter happens. Unlike the stormy passions fueled by projection, recognition between two prepared souls does not come like a tempest, but like clarity. There is no need to prove compatibility, to insist, or to convince yourself it's love. Simply being together carries the undeniable sense of belonging. As Jung wrote, it is the meeting of two who have become whole enough not to need each other and yet still choose to walk side by side. This kind of bond does not demand renunciation of identity, nor require mutilation of essence. On the contrary, it expands it. You discover that you can be fully yourself, with all your intensity, depth, and contradictions, without fear of pushing the other away, because they not only tolerate, but recognize and value these aspects as part of what makes you unique. Neuroscience even shows differences here. Unlike passions based on unstable dopamine highs, conscious love activates circuits of trust and safety, with greater release of oxytocin and serotonin. That is why it feels less like anxiety and more like peace. There is no constant fear of loss because the bond does not depend on possession, but on presence. In Stoic language, this encounter is the fruit of inner discipline. You become capable of loving not out of the need to be loved, but out of the virtue of offering love. And this freedom makes the bond solid, because it's not built on emotional bargaining, but conscious choice. When two whole souls meet, the relationship stops being a prison and becomes a sanctuary. There is room for solitude within partnership, room for individual growth within union. Differences are not threats, but invitations to mutual maturity. This recognition does not arrive with fireworks, but with such profound serenity that it feels impossible to ignore. I already knew you, even before I met you, not as obsession, but as a memory of something always meant to be. This is when the universe reveals its wisdom. Every delay, every disappointment, every pain was not punishment. It was preparation. Only after enduring the tests and crossing the deserts could you sustain this level of encounter without losing yourself. The meaning of the tests and the awakening to conscious love. Looking back, you see that nothing was in vain. Every moment of solitude, every disappointment, every shadow faced, all of it was part of an invisible staircase leading you to where you stand now. The universe never punished you. It prepared you. Jung reminds us that individuation is always painful because it requires separating from the collective, the inherited, and the superficial in order to become who you truly are. The Stoics, in turn, teach that nothing that happens to us is useless. Everything contributes to the building of our inner fortress. Together, these paths reveal that conscious love is only possible after passing through the fire of transformation. The meaning of the tests, then, is simple yet profound. To make you a vessel capable of holding love without breaking, without losing yourself, without shrinking. To love not from lack, but from fullness. To recognize in the other not your salvation, but the companion who celebrates your completeness. If you see yourself reflected in this journey, know this: the wait was not wasted time, but sowing time. What seemed like delay was simply maturation. And when the encounter finally comes, if it has not already, you will be ready to live not just any love, but a love that expands, sustains, and transforms. Now I invite you to share in the comments, which of these tests do you feel you are going through right now? Your reflection might illuminate the path for someone else seeking to understand their own process. And if this video brought clarity to your heart, subscribe to the channel and share it with someone you feel needs to hear these words. The universe has not forgotten you. It is shaping you so that, when true love arrives, you will be able to recognize it and live it in its fullness.